high up there, in terms of um, like the world in terms of debt. So, do you understand like how it is that the U.S. goes into debt? Like, what is it that we do? Like, how do we go into debt? For sure. But what's it like if you, Aaliyah, go into debt? How what will you do? How what's the tool you would use to go into debt? You get a loan, right? Like you go and you get a student loan or a car loan or you get a credit card, which in essence is a loan from a bank. So the United States government is the same way, but our loans function a little bit differently. And I'm going to way oversimplify it, but basically our loans are bonds. So do any of you have a savings bond? Yeah? And how do you view that savings bond? Is it like positive or negative to you? Why? When can you use it? Huh? She won't tell you? Do you know when you can turn yours in? Is yours in 18? It's not, yeah. So, so a bond is basically, your grandma when you're born, they're like, or your great aunt Trudy or whatever, she buys this bond and she's like, oh, look at that bouncing baby, and she gives, way oversimplifying, she buys you a $25 bond. They give it to you, your parents hang on to it, and then at 18 you can turn it back in, and there's different, let's just pretend you can turn it back in for $50, okay? So that $25 then, that represents earnings, right, for you, but it's debt to the United States government. So it was a $25 loan 18 years ago that Aunt Trudy gave to the bank, or gave to the government, and then the government's going to pay it back plus interest, right? So when we look at our debt where it's held, most of it, like this big chunk, it says it's held by U.S. individuals and institutions. So it's your banks. Like, remember in monetary policy when you learned about buying and selling bonds? Federal Reserve, buying and selling bonds. So they're buying and selling our debt. So they buy and sell it to people to try to affect, like different, like affect economic, growth and whatever. But it still represents that debt. If you look right here, what does that say? Oh, the Social Security Trust Fund. All that money that we're putting in for Social Security gets part of it gets invested because they're trying to make some kind of money. And typically, U.S. savings bonds are one of the safest investments a person can make because U.S. always pays their debts. But how do we pay our debt? When Aaliyah finally gets to redeem her savings bond and she goes to the bank to redeem it, how will the federal government have money to give her? They're probably going to have to sell more bonds, because like either like they can tax to pay it or they can go into debt to pay it. Like those are your options. You can bring in more money or you can go into more debt. Well, you can only keep going into more debt if people want your bonds. So we've got to make sure that we keep our bonds like good. They've got to be like advantageous and people have to want them. When we talk about, like you always hear people say that China owns America. Well, what we're talking about is Chinese investors. There's been a lot of discretionary income, like in countries that have been growing so much. And so it's been investors and their banks. It's not literally like the Chinese government owns us or they're loaning us money. It's like because it's an investment to most people. So is the debt a problem? Karen, you've been quiet today. What do you think? You're always quiet. I don't know why I said that, but do you think do you think that's a problem, the national government? But does it affect you? So why would you have to raise taxes? In order to pay back the debt? Okay. Well, what if we don't? What if we just keep going into debt? But if we keep paying it, so is it a problem? Who cares? If people will keep loaning us money and we can keep paying back our debt, why is that a problem? Could definitely be there, for sure.
If it keeps going up and we just keep not being able to pay back all of it and the world explodes, it doesn't even matter.
But if the world explodes, I don't know. I feel like I might have bigger issues at that point.
Yeah.
So the debt ceiling, what they were talking about, that's the maximum amount of bonds that we are going to allow the government to issue. And I am way oversimplifying it and like because that's what works in my head. But it's the same basic premise. I mean, there's different kinds of bonds and there's, blah 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 blah. But that's really the basic idea. Okay? All right, here's what I want you guys to do. I want you to take a look at the questions that are there on your desk, and I want you guys to spend some time addressing the questions that we should have covered today. So, where we say most of our economic policy decisions are the responsibility of Congress, how and why. You guys need to talk and make sure that you can answer that one. The one that says, how is the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Act an example of legislative oversight? Want to make sure you can answer that. And then, how does deficit financing hamper the government's ability to spend money on discretionary programs? So I'll give you guys a couple minutes to kind of talk. You can even jot down answers if you want, and then I'm going to hear what your thoughts are.